that nothing was going on in the area, but now they claim they were training that night. Is that true, or is this a cover-up? Let's meet our panel to see what they make of this new information. Here in Los Angeles, Captain Robert Salas, the United States Air Force retired. Back in 1967, Bob was a missile launch officer at Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana. He says a UFO hovered over his nuclear missile site and disabled all the missiles. Wrote a book about it called Faded Giant. In Washington, James Fox, the documentary filmmaker of Out of the Blue. And in San Francisco, Michael Shermer, the publisher of Skeptic magazine, author of a new book titled The Mind of the Market. I know you weren't involved in this, Captain Salas, but does this story surprise you?
Doesn't surprise me at all. It seems like every time there's a credible UFO story out there that involves the Air Force has some kind of reason to discredit it. Certainly, that was the case in my story also.
We're now also joined by Sergeant Jim Penniston, United States Air Force retired, as is Captain Salas. He was at Woodbridge security supervisor at the Brentwaters Woodbridge base. He says he sat with a UFO on the ground for 45 minutes before it hovered over him and shot into the air. Why weren't you taken seriously, Sergeant Penniston?
Well, I believe that at the time we were taken very seriously. Just that I think the Air Force wanted to go ahead and make sure that they had a handle on the situation.
James Fox, I know you've been probing this for a long time. We've never got an answer to this. Why do you think the Air Force doesn't want this out?
Well, I mean, what are they going to say? We don't know what's flying around in our airspace with impunity.
Yeah, why can't they say that?
I think that possibly because I wish they would. And if the Air Force is listening tonight, why don't you tell us the truth? You know,
why do you think they don't?
I think that to admit that there are objects of unknown origin flying around in our airspace with impunity and can fly rings around our fastest jets, they probably just are fearful of relinquishing that information. I want to sort of say something quickly
hold on, Jim. Michael Sherman, now that they've said that there were objects flying in the sky, do you think there's a kind of cover-up here, or this is a cop-out? What do you make of it?
I think before we assume there's some sort of conspiratorial cover-up, we have to remember that bureaucratic agencies are not always going to be swift to give a proper answer until they check with channels on what can be given to the American public in the interest of national security. Remember, we're at war, so we're not likely going to be told about top-secret aircraft and so on. So somebody has to check with somebody, up top before they leak it to the press what was actually going on. So we should expect that kind of thing. Not a cover-up, just national security interests.
Now, do you deny do you think Captain Salas is lying? Do you think Sergeant Penniston?
No, not at all. I think we're not always reliable observers. It's hard to say. We honestly misunderstand or misperceive things. And I think before we say something is out of this world, let's first make sure that it's not in it. And just because we can't explain something doesn't mean it's extraterrestrial.
Okay.
And we have to remember that.
I got to get a break. Let me pick up with that and more on the comments of Michael right after this. Captain Salas, Michael Shermer is saying that you're not corrupt or anything. You just didn't see what you saw.
Well, actually, I didn't even see a UFO. I was in a capsule 60 feet underground, and the UFO was reported by my topside guard. A bright red oval object hovering outside the front gate.
He told you? He
told me. He was very agitated, frightened when he told me this over the phone. Now, the reason I believe that what he told me was true is because they had no access to our missile system. They had no way to control it. And while this object was up there, my missiles shut down. And these Minuteman missiles are very reliable, as you might imagine. Nuclear weapons we're talking about here. The system,
shut down.
They shut down. One after the other. I remember losing all of them. And not only that, but 10 more missiles were shut down under similar circumstances. UFOs were observed at another launch control facility. So this is 20 missiles in 1967 were shut down with UFOs.
And Sergeant, you sat with a UFO on the ground?
Yeah, I fully investigated it. Myself and my team, we went around and checked the parameter of the craft out. We measured it. We took temperature readings. We took photographs. We did a complete examination, a thorough examination of the craft on the ground.
Penniston, talk about the symbols that you saw on the craft. I find that remarkable.
Well, the symbols, if it wasn't astonishing enough just to have, you know, a craft like that in front of you, then we're looking for crew compartments and things like that. In intakes, we find, measuring about 3 feet, we find symbols that were etched into the side of the craft that, to this day, I have no idea what they are, but it's amazing.
Sergeant, where did the craft go? Where did the craft go?
Well, after the 45 minutes, Larry, it went it lifted off, it started emulating very bright light, and it started to raise to treetop level, and then momentarily sat there above the tree line, and then took off at a credible rate of speed.
Did it make a lot of sound?
No sound.
No sound.
It made no
James,
sound at all.
You weren't there. Let him tell me.
Sorry. No problem.
It made no sound, Jim?
No sound there, Larry. And the most interesting part that I found about it is that there was no air displacement. I mean, something leaving that fast has to have sonic booms. It was literally gone in a blink of an eye. Had to have air disturbance.
James, we've asked you this before. Why wasn't the Sergeant Penniston story and the Captain Salas story front page news?
I don't know. You're forcing me to speculate, Larry. I mean, I think the lack of an explanation. Obviously, clearly, the Air Force feels compelled to come up with a conventional explanation when clearly there just isn't one. I mean, we were in Stephenville, for the last 3 days with the whole camera crew interviewing witnesses, and whatever it was, it certainly wasn't military jets because, you know, a silent flight, 90-angle turns.
I know, but I'll go back to this. So let's forget the Air Force. The New York Times doesn't believe you. They don't believe Captain Salas. They don't believe Sergeant Penniston. They don't believe you, right?
Well,
is that what our guess is? They don't believe you.
I think the tables are turning, don't you, Jim?
Well, you know what? Here's what I find. Let's talk about Texas, if you don't mind, Larry, a second about the Air Force in Texas. Here's the public relations officers, right? They release a statement from the 301st saying that they made an error. I'm going to tell you right now, 21 years in the service, the Air Force don't release statements that said they made an error. What they're doing is covering their tracks. If they said there was 10 aircraft out there in the area,
okay, I want to. Jim, I got to get a break. We'll come back to you.
Okay,
and I want to get Michael Shermer's response to this. We're close on time.
And moved through the forest, bobbing, avoiding trees, something that broke into other objects. I definitely saw something under intelligent control that could do things that I don't think any human could do. I went out to disprove what I heard had taken place, and was thinking at the time, why did I ever get involved in this? Nobody's going to believe it.
You can't deny it. It did happen. It's proven that it did happen. I can't explain it. We couldn't explain it, but it was real.